The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to APS Webinars. The title of today's webinar is Value Proposition and Tailoring Your Message to Specific Audiences. I'm Crystal Bailey, and I'll be your host for today's broadcast. Thank you all so much for joining us. APS Webinars are brought to you as a service of the American Physical Society, connecting you with the expertise of individuals who can offer insight into physics careers, educational programs, and professional development for students, working physicists, and educators. Today's presentation features Peter Fiske, who I will introduce in more detail in a second. But first, I'd like to talk about a little bit of housekeeping. Peter, could you advance? So all of you out there should see a panel very similar to this, and I just want to point out a couple features. If at any point you want to ask a question or respond to Peter's questions, there's going to be a little bit of interactive discussion. Please type your responses in that questions box and hit send, and we will see them. You can also maximize and minimize your GoToWebinar panel by clicking on that little orange arrow that's kind of at the top left of the panel. And you can also adjust your audio connection options by toggling between computer and the phone. Generally speaking, we're going to have a lot of presentation at the beginning, and then the end, the last 15 minutes or so, will be open Q&A. So we'll definitely have time for you to ask your questions and get them answered. A link to the recording of today's presentation will be emailed to you after today's event. It'll take us about 48 hours to prepare that, but if you've registered, you'll get an email with the recording attached. I also want to encourage everybody, when you do leave today, to please take a moment to complete our survey so we can continue to improve our ability to provide you with these services. Peter, can you advance one more?
I would be happy to.
Thank you. I also want to briefly mention that, Peter's webinar, this is the second of three that he's very kindly doing for us. The next one that Peter is hosting is How to Shape.
Second of five.
Well, five, absolutely.
Five, isn't it? Yeah.
Good point. Good point. Second of five. The first three kind of deal with entrepreneurial themes. And the next one that Peter is doing is How to Shape Your Pitch. It'll follow on from this one. Peter's also doing a great, very needed webinar on how to use online tools to communicate effectively. So we're something we all need to learn about, and we're really looking
now that we are all doing that. Yes.
Yes, exactly. So basically, if you want to, and if you can click one more, Peter, so that the URL comes up. If you go to this URL, you can sign up. You never have to miss a broadcast. Sign up at this URL, and you'll get all the information about upcoming webinars. So please go do that. Okay, now I'm going to take a moment to introduce Peter. At the time I made this slide, you'll note on Peter's last webinar, if you were there, you'll notice he was sporting a kind of a COVID look.
Oh yeah, I was Shaggy Boy.
Shaggy, and now he.
Ta-da! Surprise, Crystal.
I
cleaned up my act.
He surprised me today. So Peter is the executive director of NAWI, which is the National Alliance for Water Innovation. It's a coalition between labs, universities, and U.S. water companies committed to developing game-changing technologies to enable distributed desalination and water reuse. Peter is a serial entrepreneur, seasoned senior executive. He is also an excellent public speaker, career coach, and author. Peter has given workshops on career-related stuff at March meeting for many, many years, always well attended and great feedback. He's also an author of a great book, Put Your Science to Work. So I encourage you to try to find that if you can. Check it out. And Peter has been my colleague in this great realm of careers for nearly 10 years. So I love working with Peter, and I'm really glad to be with him today on this. So, Peter?
Well, thank you, Crystal. Thank you so much for that introduction, and welcome, everybody. It's great to have you all here today. I'm calling you, and here in Oakland, California, in the San Francisco Bay Area. Crystal is in Washington, D.C., and we understand that many of you are all over the world. So great to have a huge audience. And I'll just say by way of introduction that, my background, I am a scientist. My PhD is in geochemistry and material science. I have been in the research community in part of my career. I've been in the science policy community for part of my career, and I've been in the entrepreneurship and startup community for part of my career. In fact, the last 18 years, I've been managing and leading startups, including several companies that have grown pretty substantially. And so when Crystal and I thought about this webinar series, one of the things we knew was that physicists of all, at every point in their career are always kind of curious and concerned about how their research or how their physics experience might either map onto an industry career, or how research activities that they're doing might be commercializable technologies. And this world of startups is super exciting, and so everybody asks, like, well, what's it like, and do I have something that could take me into the startup world? And so this summer is as Crystal's and my effort to kind of give you kind of a mini MBA. So this is our attempt to kind of encapsulate a set of concepts that I have found over my years in business to be extremely helpful in helping people who are coming from the technology side, from the research side, both understand and also figure out where they can apply their skills, either in an industry career or commercializing technology for industry. And then, as Crystal said, I've also throughout my career been writing and lecturing on the subject of career development. And I am very concerned that physics trained people, both undergraduates and PhDs, don't often get a lot of exposure to the industry side. So as Crystal pointed out, we have a set of webinars later this summer, including communication skills, etc. But we started this webinar series last week with a discussion of technology commercialization, the idea of taking technologies out of the laboratory and into the marketplace. And for those of you who weren't present, we kind of talked for a while about this question, what is an invention? And the audience volunteered a bunch of definitions, and we ended up coming up with an invention as being something new, and it's often something technical. But then I challenged the audience last week with this question, what is an innovation? And we spent some time discussing this and kind of arrived at the conclusion that an innovation is something new that is useful. And that distinction between an invention and an innovation is particularly important because, as we discussed last week, the value systems in academia and in industry are very, very different in the academic culture versus the industry culture. And you've been, I guess most of you have largely been in the academic culture for your entire careers. And in the academic culture, we are rewarded and we emphasize discoveries and things that are interesting, that they're on the forefront of science. And frankly, we like things that are interesting, kind of whether or not it's useful. It's interesting, intellectually, scientifically. In industry, we have a different culture. The best discoveries are those things that are useful and whether or not it's actually interesting. So there's some very important things that happen in industry that frankly aren't terribly technical. And some intellectually driven people might find are not terribly interesting, but they have profound effects on how an industry develops and how a company grows. And so this culture is really tough because I think in the academic culture, the focus on new and novelty and interesting tends to lead to invention, whereas in industry culture, these things need to lead to innovation, which, as we said, is not just the process of something that's new, but something that's new and useful. Okay? And so in our discussion last week, we then talked about this wonderful, wonderful new concept that is coming into the business world called the business model canvas. And for those of you who were on the call last week, I sincerely recommend that you go to Amazon or wherever you buy your books and get a copy of this book, Business Model Generation. This book is about, I guess, 10 or 12 years old now. And as I described to you all last week, the principles of the business model canvas and business model generation truly have been revolutionary for how people develop business ideas and start companies. And what's interesting, actually, is that this book and the concepts behind this book originated in a PhD thesis out of the University of Lausanne. So it is actually a very interesting piece of scholarship that has revolutionized how people think about startups. Last week, I told you that the business model canvas is a structure, a framework that describes the core activities of any business. And in fact, the people who developed this, Alexander Osterhalder, was influential when he realized that he could distill, no matter how different the business, he could distill out 9 core functional elements that defined a business. And this framework, the business model canvas, is then what he and others have used to analyze whether new inventions and innovations actually have the potential to be a growing business. In our talk last week, I focused on this right-hand side of the canvas, the value proposition and customer segment. And we spent a little bit of time talking about what is this idea of a customer segment. And we discussed that a customer segment is a group of customers in an industry or maybe in several industries, but the group of customers tends to have the same set of problems and tends to seek similar solutions to those problems. Okay, so they don't have to be in a single industry, but there are people in job roles that are trying to get work done and that face similar challenges. Okay. Then we discussed the fact that for customer segments, there was something that your innovation represented, which was a set of value propositions. And that is all the key things that you are doing for this customer segment that would address their problems and help them do their job. And in our talk last week, we talked about how value propositions are only relative to a specific customer segment, right? And customer segments tend to be defined by the fact that they have similar value propositions that your product or idea addresses. And the other thing that we emphasized in particular was that customer segments are people. It's very common for people in academia to look at industry and say, well, I've got a new product idea. It's a catalyst and it's for the automotive industry. And one of the things we discussed last week was the automotive industry is not a customer segment. Automotive industry is made up of a whole bunch of companies, and in those companies are people, and those people make decisions, and those decisions are going to govern whether they adopt something new, like your product, right? So this is where the value of this analysis comes in. Is it by defining and understanding customer segments, we get key insights into how our invention, which is new and interesting to us, may actually be an innovation in how these customers do their job. Okay, so that was how we started, and that's kind of we ended last week, and I talked to you all a little bit about entrepreneurship, a little bit about my experience in entrepreneurship. By the way, as Crystal pointed out, if you would like to go back and listen to last week's webinar, Crystal, how do they do that? I think you're going to have the YouTube channel up soon. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct, Peter. If you had registered, you would have gotten an email with the video attached, but we're also adding it to the APS YouTube channel. It will be up within a day or so. If the easiest way would be to go to that URL for our summer webinar series, and that link will be there very, very shortly.
So there you go. If you want to hear some of that in greater gory detail, you're welcome to do that. So that brings us up to where we are today. And I said that one of the key elements of a value proposition is that it's the benefit that the customer segment derives by adopting the product or service enabled by your innovation. Now, the common thing that always technical people struggle with is they say, yeah, but what about the science or technology? I mean, this is a really exciting piece of science or technology. And it's always somewhat, kind of disappointing when academic and science people come into the business world, because they often find out that customers actually don't care about the technology. They don't care how it works. They care that it solves a problem that they have. So in that respect, customers can be very self-centered. They're not that curious about the fact that your invention involves, atomic vapor deposition of ceramics onto a metal. They don't care that it's got certain optical properties. They don't care that it's got that it's 10 times better than the current material. All they care about is that it makes the camera hold more memory, or it makes the fuel cell last 10 times longer. And so that can sometimes honestly be a little bit of a disappointment for technical people in the business world, is that you're dealing with people who frankly have problems and they want to address their problems. On the flip side, I think one of the things that I want to make sure that you understand in today's discussion is that a key element, not just to being successful in business, but in any endeavor you take, even your PhD, it is extremely helpful for you to have a better understanding of your customer. And that's what we're going to talk about now. We're going to talk about the need and the value of what's called customer profiling, and understanding your customer segment, and then being able to figure out what specific value propositions you offer that customer segment, okay? That's what we're gonna do now. Now, for those of you who remember from last week, one of the challenges I gave you was that it is very common in our educational world, it's very common in our world of physics, that the first step in doing research is to go online or go to the library. And for publications and data, that's certainly the case. But when you wanna go out and actually find out what these customer segments are, what their work is, and what their challenges are, the library is no good to you. You have to get out of the building. You literally have to get out off the campus and get out there and talk to people in these industry settings and learn from them what their real challenges are, rather than trying to guess, oh, this new invention is a great thing, it'll help them. You need to go out and first learn what they need. That's the core of what we're going to talk about today. So I said that, part of the business model canvas is this customer segment and this value proposition. And what we're going to do in today's webinar is talk about the detailed analysis tools for understanding the customer, and also the analysis tools for understanding your value proposition. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, wait a minute, Peter, I know what my invention is. I know what my value proposition is. It's a ceramic coating that you can put on top of it. And it's like, yeah, stop. You know the technical characteristics of the invention that you're working on, but you may not understand what its value is to this customer. So this is what we're going to do. We're going to learn customer profiling. Okay? So in customer profiling, you have to understand who the customer is and what is their job, the pains that they encounter in doing that job, and the gains that they aspire to in that job. And so this profiling starts with trying to learn about this customer and their job. Okay, what's our customer trying to get done in their work and in their lives? And jobs are the specific tasks that they're trying to perform, that they are in, that's their job. They were hired to accomplish these things. And sometimes these things represent problems that they need to solve. Sometimes they are activities that they just need to maintain. But these are things that they are responsible for dealing with. And I think one of the key things that it's important for you to understand, which makes sense, is that people have a lot of emotional investment in their job. They want to be successful. They have aspirations for being successful. And they also have things that are a problem for them, okay? These are things that are literally challenges. Wow, it takes me 45 minutes to download this database and get it converted. Or they can be emotional pain, such as I don't have the right equipment to be effective in my position, or I don't want to feel ashamed if my service group is not able to keep up with customer demand. So pains, we all live with pains. We all live with things in the work that we're doing that we are frustrated by, that we wish could be alleviated. Those are what we call customer pains. At the same time, we have these things called gains. These are things we aspire to, or things that would be great. I would love it if my service group had a volume and a customer satisfaction way above the rest of the group. I would love it if I had a tool that would cut the time that I'm spending downloading this data set from 45 minutes to 30 seconds. That would be huge in my life. When you talk to customers and you talk about their jobs, very often they will also reveal their pains, and they will also reveal their gains, the things they hope for, the things they're frustrated by, the things they wish they could change. And in many terms, many times, these terms are very framed in an emotional term. And one of the key things about being a researcher, which is what you are, is that you are taking data. You are capturing very carefully in your conversations with these customers what their job types are, what their tasks are, what their pains are, and what their gains are. And in the business model canvas and in the I-Core program, which is one of the programs we discussed last week, I described how we sometimes send teams of scientists off to do what's called customer discovery interviews. And in these customer discovery interviews, they sit down with people in these jobs and they ask questions and try to learn these three things. What tasks are you trying to perform? What are your pains and what are your gains? So when a scientist initially thinks that my customer is the automotive industry, what they soon discover is that customers are people. And if I have a new coating for a sensor that can detect oxygen at high temperature, who is my customer? It's not the automotive industry. It's the automobile designer. No, it's actually the combustion engineer who is working on the latest drivetrain for a set of commercial cars, and she is challenged to extract greater horsepower with greater fuel efficiency. And she needs technology to help her better diagnose what's going on inside the engine that they are working with, and she does not have economical solutions for robust sensors. So I am now talking about a person, and she has a set of tasks and challenges she's trying to perform, and my innovation, this novel high temperature ceramic coating on a sensor, is going to be one of the ways that she can achieve gain and alleviate pain. So yeah, it sounds very emotional, doesn't it? And in fact, one of the things you learn in doing customer discovery interviews is that you learn the emotion associated with people and their jobs. In fact, I think one of the things that makes very good business people is that they are genuinely empathetic. They're really trying to understand what their client, what their customer segment is struggling with and how they can help them. Okay, so that's the customer profiling, and the customer profiling is done with a set of interviews where you try to understand the customer segment. At the same time, you have your invention, right? Your innovation. And you think, oh, I know exactly why this is valuable. I have all these, it's great, it's better than the current products, it's cheaper, it's faster, it's all these great things. Well, those are notions in your mind that those things are valuable, but you need to understand why they're valuable to the customer. And so we need to do something called value mapping, which is taking your invention or your innovation and determining which things are the most valuable for these specific customer segments. So the first step in value mapping is to simply kind of unpack your innovation or your invention and try to list all the products or services and things that your value proposition is built around. So you sit there and say, okay, I've got a new ceramic coating, and it enables an oxygen sensor. Okay, it's cheaper than existing technologies. It is 5 times more robust than current technologies. Those are good things. How big is it? Oh, how fast does it work? Oh, it takes 1/4 of a second. Well, is that going to be compatible with taking a measurement inside the combustion chamber? Maybe not. Maybe it's still valuable, but it needs to be further downstream in the engine. So as you begin to think about what are the qualities and characteristics of this technology, how could it be potentially useful, you sort of brainstorm. You say, oh, well, here's one funny thing. This sensor would allow people to use fewer sensors in the initial carburation and fuel mixing. Oh, well, that means that even if the sensor is still expensive, it means that another part further up in the drivetrain could be eliminated. So maybe it actually is not as expensive when I factor in those other things. Now, all those values or possible values are specific to a customer segment, okay? For the standpoint of the automotive engineer, she is trying to solve a design problem of how to make a drivetrain that's going to achieve a certain horsepower with a reduced amount of emissions. In that case, the sensor technology is one of the ways that she can then use the sensor to tune the rest of the system. There is another customer segment who you are not directly selling to, and that is the end customer. The end customer wants a faster, stronger car and better fuel economy and lower emissions. But as you begin to explore these possible qualities, you discover that there's some things that you think are valuable, but might not be valuable. Now, on the one hand, you've got to list all the products and services your invention enables, like what helps this customer complete their function, and as I said, social and even emotional needs. What are the types? You could have physical things, you could have intangible products and services, digital, like software, financial, such as tools to enable people to finance things more easily. And as you kind of think about all those possible ways in which your innovation can enable something, you rank those things or guess your rankings relevant and relative to that customer segment. Now, in your invention or your idea, there's some things you think you're going to relieve. So for example, you are going to relieve specific customer pain. Maybe you should focus on the innovations that focus on pains that matter the most. Does this automotive engineer care if the sensor is a few dollars more or less than a current sensor? Maybe in the whole scheme of the budget that she has to do, that she's shooting for, maybe the sensor is just not that, the cost isn't a big deal. But often the best innovations are those that focus on a few specific pains and they alleviate those pains extremely well. So maybe the fact that the sensor lasts 10 times longer than other sensors means that that whole pain associated with the servicing of sensors inside an automobile goes away. That's a very specific pain, and a 10x improvement in lifespan of the sensor would make things much, much better. So in this case, you've got to ask yourself, are these products or services reducing the cost, reducing the frustration? Are they improving performance? Are they reducing risk? These are all elements of customer pain, both for the automotive design engineer and for the end customer. And again, in the case of pain, you need to rank relevance to the customer and the customer segment. Now, your value proposition, your invention has ways it can alleviate pain. It can also increase gains. And this is another way that we need to map the value of this idea that you have. So describe how your products or services create customer gains. And these are gains such as financial gains. Oh, it's going to save me money. Or functional gains. It enables me to see something that I didn't know before and I want to know now. There can even be social gains, including the fact that a more powerful car can be very satisfying, or even emotional gains. your automotive engineer is very hard pressed to achieve the energy efficiency with the horsepower and the cost that she's been challenged by her product manager. She's got a need, an emotional need to make that achievement, and you can help her do that. So ask yourself, could inventions based on this product or service create savings? Do they outperform current options? Do they make your customer's life easier? And again, just like we did with the previous examples, you come up with this brainstorming list and then you try to rank them. Now, here's what you do. In this case, after you have reflected on your value propositions, you have a bunch of testable hypotheses, right? You've now asked yourself, I think that this customer segment would care about reliability the most. And then you go out and you actually sit down with the customer. And in profiling the customer, you can ask her about her pains and her gains. And you can say, so if you had a sensor that lasted 10 times as long, that would probably be pretty important for you achieving your goals with this product design, correct? And she'd say, yeah, but only to a point. Oh, tell me more. Well, she says, strictly speaking, we have several options to achieve energy efficiency. We can improve the carburation, and we can use additional sensors to sense the oxygen levels inside the combustion chamber. Or we can choose to lower the weight in the vehicle. So I actually have some trade-offs. I don't necessarily need a more efficient engine if I can strip out the weight of the vehicle somewhere else. Now, this is often a very difficult thing for technical people to do, because in coming up with your invention or your innovation, you've invested in a lot of emotional, spirit. This is a special thing that an idea that you've created. It's something you're in love with. It's something you're passionate about. And it's very hard to offer it up and hear that in some settings, it's not really that big a problem, or I have other options. And emotionally for you, you can sit there and say, yeah, but isn't this so great? And often you can find yourself trying to convince customers of something about the technical merit of your idea, which they might agree, yeah, it's a better sensor, longer life, that's great. But if the customer does not have pain or gains that can be addressed by that invention that you've got, you need to focus on different customers. Now, don't give up, because one of the key things that happens in this process of customer discovery and value mapping is that as you make your journey, it is inevitable. In fact, it's been well documented in business that the initial assumptions that people have had when they started their business or started with an invention, the initial assumptions of the value proposition are almost always wrong. But what happens is, as they explore, they find out that, oh, a low-cost sensor or a sensor that lasts 10 times as long, yeah, those are interesting value propositions, but the real advantage is something totally different. And in fact, they never had an idea what that other key value proposition was. They didn't even think about the fact that if you have a sensor in the exhaust manifold, you can actually change the temperature in the catalytic converter. And that means the catalytic converter can last 10 times as long, which is a huge benefit. And so this is, I think, one of the challenges, that technical people are used to being in the environment in which they're the experts. They're used to being the ones who tell people all the details and the facts. When you embark on customer profiling and value mapping, you have to literally become the dummy. You have to open yourself up to the fact that your initial assumptions may be incorrect, and that there is another hidden value proposition that you haven't discovered yet. So remember what we said, customer segments are people. It's not companies who buy things. People make decisions. People make decisions about what they buy, even in a technical environment like Ford Motor Company. You are not selling to an industry, you're not selling to a company, you're selling to a person. Now, she has to make a decision, often a very hard decision, that she's going to break with what she's doing now and try this new thing that you've proposed. That can be very hard for people to do. Now remember, the value proposition describes the benefit your customer will derive by adopting your product or service. It is not the technical qualification. So it's very natural for physicists to say, my value proposition is here. This is a device, it's a portable fuel cell system. You can literally carry it around and it produces this amount of power and it has this amount of fuel consumption and this is the size and that is great. Isn't this a fabulous value proposition? Well, the problem is that's not a value proposition. Those are technical features. Those are the things that this technology can do. The value proposition is what it can do for someone. For example, it means that somebody in a motorhome sitting by a lake during the coronavirus can power a TV and have microwave popcorn. Now, I know you didn't get your PhD in physics to enable people to sit by a lake and watch TV and eat popcorn. But there are a lot of people who want to sit by a lake and watch TV and eat popcorn. And so it's actually very valuable because a lot of people can't do that. And your invention, your innovation makes that possible, especially because these technical features enable a certain value propositions. It can last for 4 days and you can carry it around. So that's what value proposition, that's what value mapping is. But again, these 3 value propositions here, you wouldn't know this until you interviewed a bunch of customers who said, I don't have any option right now. If I want to watch a TV, I can't pop my popcorn. And if I want to pop my popcorn, I have to turn off, you know, Fox News. Too bad. Okay. But what makes a really good value proposition? Here are some of the key qualities that make excellent value propositions. 1, a customer would actually say it. Oh, I really wish I could do these 2 things at once. And when you tell them, I've got something that can make you do both things at once, they understand it immediately. Another key quality is that it provides a direct benefit to the customer and that it can be something that's uniquely delivered by you, that is not any other substitute that people can achieve the same things. Good value propositions are often specific and quantifiable, quantitative, and they're concise. You don't have to explain a bunch of stuff. You say, this sensor enables you to lower the temperature in your catalytic converter, increasing catalytic converter life by a factor of 4. Wow. The design engineer knows exactly what would happen with that. And the end customer, they don't care about the lifetime of their catalytic converter. They care about the overall operating cost of their vehicle going down because they're getting better gas mileage and they don't have to service their catalytic converter anymore. That's what value proposition is all about. Now, let's play a game. In the last few minutes we have, I want you to think about a customer that many of you have right now, your advisor. Now, I realize some of you are undergraduates, but maybe you'll learn something by listening to the graduate students who are on this call today. So I want you to open up your chat window and I want you to tell me, for those of you who are in grad school, maybe those of you who finished graduate school, maybe some of you are actually advisors on this call right now, but I want you to list for me some of the jobs or tasks that you understand your advisor needs to get done in their work and in their lives, okay? Crystal, what are some people saying? What are some of the jobs that they understand their PhD advisor needs to accomplish in their day and in their life?
Okay, and folks, type it into the questions box. We will see your responses. Okay, we're getting them in right now. One of the things is grant writing, needing to get money to fund their research.
Absolutely. So PhD advisors have research labs that need to be supported with grant dollars. So one of the key activities they have, the key tasks, is formulating research proposals and getting them funded. That's great. Crystal, what others are coming up?
Another one, research group management, managing, I assume the people in the research group.
Sure. So this is the challenge that an advisor has, to organize all the different graduate students and undergrads and make sure that everybody is coordinated in their activities, that equipment and resources are present. Yeah, that's an absolutely important task that the PI has to do. What's another Crystal?
Oh, there's so many good ones coming in here. Writing reports to grant agencies.
Yep, those are often these tedious quarterly reports that need to be filled out. And often when somebody has multiple grants, they have to juggle those things. Absolutely.
Publishing papers
What's
is
some
another.
more? Publishing papers, yeah, that's a critical part of maintaining success in an academic career.
Yep, going to conferences, giving presentations about talks, managing
Excellent.
budgets.
Managing budgets, yeah, that's a very important one. Often something that grad students don't realize until they really see up close all the balancing acts that PIs have to do. So those are great and keep on coming. But as you can tell, we're going to continue with this exercise. We're doing the customer segment called the PhD advisor. And you've given me some great illustrations of some of the tasks that this customer segment deals with, okay? Now, let's talk about pain. What are some of the things that the PhD advisor struggles with or wants to avoid or doesn't like? So what are some of those things that you think or you know, maybe from your own experience, are pains for your PhD advisor? Crystal, is anybody volunteering some?
They're streaming in. Yeah, we've hit a nerve here. This is great.
I hit a nerve, oh dear.
So research misconduct.
Yes.
That's
Oh
pretty
my
broad, but
God.
yes.
But and what I'm so glad, so that one is great because you know right away, right? Everybody knows what that means. Everybody knows not just that like, oh, it's unfortunate, but the emotional toll. The emotional toll it puts on a research group if there's any question about something like that. That's a great example of an advisor's pain. What are some more, Crystal?
Confused grad students.
Never happens. Yes, the time and the frustration trying to figure out how to explain something or convey a set of needs to a graduate student who's not understanding. Yes, very painful. What are more?
Another one is not getting tenure.
Oh my God, yes. Another element that I think you now appreciate is full of emotion, right? PhD research professors under enormous load of expectation from their department and from their field. They are expected to maintain a vigorous, vibrant, innovative research program and demonstrate that by getting grants and publishing papers. And the consequence is, if they are not successful, they can essentially lose their job. So there's an enormous set of pain associated with that. What's one more, Crystal?
Struggling for space for research, like actually trying to get space on a campus to do
Absolutely.
research.
Just struggling with the resources, the physical space, the time, access to resources, to equipment, et cetera, et cetera. These are all significant pains that a PhD advisor faces. Absolutely. Okay, so let's take a deep breath. For those of you who are PhD advisors, it's okay, because now we're going to turn and we're going to do the profile on the other side. What are the benefits? What are the things that the PhD advisor, the research professor, aspires to in her career? What does she really hope for? What are the things that would be gains for her? Crystal, anybody coming up with any yet?
Yep, we got some coming in. So so actually getting tenure would be one of
Tenure, absolutely. That
others.
huge success, that point in your career, absolutely.
So a scientific breakthrough, discovering some great new scientific
Absolutely. Some major breakthrough, some major thing that would be notable, that would be publishable, that would really advance the field. Absolutely. Keep it coming, people.
Yeah, publication in a high profile journal.
Absolutely. Totally agree.
Intellectual satisfaction.
Yes. Yeah. Which is often what really drives us in these careers, is that moment and the passion of discovery. Keep going.
Yeah, so another one is being respected among your peers within your institution.
Absolutely. The reputational benefits that come from having a successful research group and doing great science.
Right.
Absolutely. One more.
Gosh, their students having a new idea or innovation.
Oh, that's lovely. Yeah, the fact that the mentoring process in the PhD education, enabling students to really grow and intellectually develop is an incredible and very satisfying part of the job. Okay, well guys, you've done a great job because you've just done a customer profile. Now the funny thing is you are the product, right? So you as a graduate student, you're the one who is essentially providing a set of products and services as a grad student, right? Now you're being paid for it, but this is the one way we can use this structure. So as a grad student, you can list all the products and services you provide. You know that you are a member of a research team, you're conducting scientific research, you are also in some cases teaching, and frankly, having now listed all the sort of pains and gains associated with the career of your advisor, you now can appreciate how your contribution is addressing and alleviating your advisor's pain. And you can think about how your activities, your research progress, your attitude in your research weekly group meetings contribute to gains for your advisor. Now, I know you've never thought of yourself as kind of a product or service, and I certainly bet that until today's conversation, you hadn't thought of your advisor as a customer segment. But by having some empathy for where your advisor is in his or her career and what he or she needs, you might better understand not just the role you fill, but the value you can bring to them. And in some cases, there might be elements of your advisor's workload and life that you're totally unaware of. There might be additional ways that you could add value to your PhD advisor's life. And what does that bring you? Well, it might bring you satisfaction to know that you're an effective and appreciated member of the team. It might bring you greater opportunities for growth and advancement. It might actually bring your advisor additional research funding, which would support you in your work. And it would certainly bring you the lasting appreciation and gratitude from your advisor. So this tool of advisor-advisee fit, how do I show up, is something that I really didn't even think about until after I had finished my kind of initial life as an academic and I was in business. And this framework of trying to understand not an individual, my advisor and all his particular weird quirks, but trying to understand him in his role, him in his customer segment, and what represented success or failure for him. And then how could I play a successful role in alleviating the pains and increasing the gains for him? And honestly, in hindsight, if I had thought about that, I think I might have been a more effective graduate student. This idea that you can think about customer segments and value propositions and value profiling is not just about technology. It's about how you can show up in any situation with a better clarity and a better strategy for how you can be effective. Okay, so I'm going to wrap up and we're going to have time for questions. So, as we said before in our last week's talk, customers do not care about technology. As much as it's fascinating to you, for the most part, they don't care. They care about solving problems. And a technology's value proposition is the benefit a customer segment derives from using it. Customers are people. They're not industries. They're not companies. They are people. And because customers are people, people need to be driven to make certain decisions and choices. People have work they need to do. They have pains they need to alleviate. They have gains they'd like to increase. These are people. And you're just like you. You have work you need to do and pains you'd like to alleviate and gains you'd like to increase. And so you are a customer segment, the grad student or the postdoc or wherever you are. And thinking about what are the products and services that can help you address your things are also an important part of innovation. We talked about value propositions. The best value propositions are a direct benefit to the customer, are uniquely delivered by your product, are specific and quantitative, and customers would actually say it and they would understand it. You can apply this analytical methodology to anything. It's not just business. You can apply it in any working relationship you have. You can look within your university and understand the relationship between the department chair and her faculty. You can understand the relationship between the dean and their department chairs. You can understand the relationship between alumni and a university administration. These tools of analysis are, in a way, very similar to all the tools of analysis you've learned, but they're not mathematical. They are relational. And we talk at our next webinar, we'll talk specifically about some of the ways for you to be more effective in clarifying the value that you're bringing and to describe your work in terms that resonate with your audience. That's what we'll be talking about next week. Okay? Well, that's it for this week. As I always do, you can always find some of my past writings on Nature Magazine's website. I think all of these are not behind a paywall. I write extensively on the subject of careers, career development, and entrepreneurship and innovation. And I hope you've enjoyed our chat today, and I'm happy to take questions. And Crystal, what are some of the questions that are coming in?
Okay, yeah, we've got a few questions. And Peter, I also just wanted to say how much I appreciated your example of the fuel thing. I was just camping on the Eastern Shore this last weekend in 95 degrees.
You're like, darn, I need one of those.
I thought I was gonna die. So boy, I would have probably paid any amount of money for that power source so I could run a fan or something.
Funny.
Anyway,
Sure.
okay, well, so one question is, you gave an example of this combustion engineer. You were saying that
Yeah.
the ceramic technology, the combustion engineer is the person that you need to talk to, and but it seems like, you said not the automotive industry, not this, that, or the other, but this very specific type of role. That seems very specific. So could you talk about just briefly how you might arrive at that is the person that you want to talk to?
Yeah, it's a great question, Crystal. It is often the case that you don't know who to talk to first. And it's often the case that part of your initial goal in your customer discovery process is literally figuring out, like, who would be this customer segment. We go in with a hypothesis. Oh, well, I have heard that there's something called a product engineer. And the product engineer sits at Ford Motor Company. And that's the person I need to talk to. So you find out through your network somebody who knows somebody who's a product engineer. You get your friend in common to introduce you to that person. That person then has an informational interview with you, and you sit down with them and you ask them about their job, and you discover, oh, as a product engineer, you do nothing with the engine. The engine's actually not even made by Ford. The engine made by a completely different company. And Ford sends a specification to that company, and that company fulfills an order. Okay, can you give me the name of that person? Or who's your point of contact at Delco, the company that makes your engines? Oh, well, you should talk to Sharon. She's one of my principal counterparties at Delco. You set up another meeting, you go meet with Sharon. And Sharon, in fact, tells you that Delco has plans for improving energy efficiency and emissions for the products they're selling to Ford. And she then says, well, the person who's really on the front line of deciding about sensors is Randall. Randall's in our engineering group, and I'll introduce you to him. Then you go down to meet Randall. Randall's finally the person you discover who would make a decision about buying a new sensor and incorporating it into Delco's motor, which is incorporated into Ford's F-150 pickup. So I think that brief illustration shows you something that a lot of scientists don't appreciate. The ecosystems in business are very complex. They are every bit as complex as ecosystems in a natural world. And until you get in there and really start to map out the ecosystem, it's very hard for you to know, like, where do I go first? But the key thing is you've got to start somewhere. Go with your initial assumption, go with your initial hypothesis, and test it. And you will most likely find out that that initial assumption is incorrect, that it'll lead you in the direction toward the true answer. So that's my advice. And as you can see, it takes time and it takes multiple conversations. What other questions are out there, Crystal?
Okay, yeah, that's great. And also there are a few people asking about, what is the next seminar and what is it called? It's called How to Shape Your Pitch. And if you sign up for the summer webinar series at the URL I provided, you'll get all the information you need. You can either sign up for the list or you can check it. I think we'll have the announcement up, the registration info up within the next couple of days. But if you just sign up for the list, you'll get an email. It'll have all that information. So earlier in the description for this presentation, you mentioned that this could actually be applied to your love life So I was wondering if you could
Yes.
say a little bit more about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think in our example with the PhD advisor, it's easy now to understand how what you take as a relationship, maybe a working relationship, maybe a personal relationship, but you sort of unpack it in terms of tasks and pains and gains. And frankly, I think the same methodology could be applied to thinking about a spouse or a significant other, somebody who you have a relationship with. And honestly, this idea of trying to understand what are they trying to accomplish, what are their pains, fears, frustrations, and what are their gains, what are the things that they would love to be able to do more of. That frame of mind can lead you to ask some really great questions, such as, how can I help this person achieve their gains? How can I relieve the pains associated with this person? What are they looking for? And we call this dating, but really what we're trying to do is find great pairs that we relate to that can help us answer the same set of questions. And so I maybe, if any of you want to embark on this analysis, you can spend a little time and think about, in a personal relationship, maybe a committed relationship, maybe a marriage, what are these things, these tasks, pains, and gains? And how could you reflect on that and maybe either think about the type of person who would be well suited to the value propositions that you offer? And that hopefully will be a lasting partnership. And with that, I think that's a great way to end, unless there are any other final questions, Crystal?
Well, Peter, I hate to do this. One really excellent question just came in.
Yeah.
So maybe just quickly in the next couple minutes, how can the academic community sell intellectual work to taxpayers, the customers,
Yeah.
who
That is a
mostly care
great
about the
question.
uses of academic research? I thought that was a great question.
That is a fabulous question, especially in today's era, right? I'm sure many of you heard this story, and I don't know exactly the names, but I think it was the director of Argonne National Lab or Fermi Lab back in the early days in the 50s or 60s, and some military person was coming to tour the lab. And he asked the director of the laboratory, after seeing all this wonderful physics all day long, he's like, well, Dr. So-and-so, what are you doing to make this, to help defend our nation? And the lab director paused and he said, well, General, I don't know what the specific technologies that we're working on to help defend the nation, but I know that everything that we're doing is making the country worth defending. Now, this feelings that scientists have about the inherent value of what they're doing is something that drives us very deeply, very passionately. And yet I think that we don't do a good enough job of showing people all the value propositions associated with the work that we do. And it's not just the popcorn, it's not just the TVs and the big motorhomes and all the good stuff, right? Because we're always making good stuff. But this nation that we have of scientists, you people, right? We are out there quietly working on problems so that they don't become problems. And frankly, given the situation we're in right now in the nation and on this planet, the fact that science needs to now more than ever be the focus of our strategy and the focus of our direction in how we address this pandemic, it should be obvious to everybody. I think that when we look and meet people who are indifferent to science or are, even dismissive, look at science and scientists as elitist and kind of distasteful, this issue of customer profiling could be very helpful to understand where are their feelings coming from, what are their current pains and gains, and how do I take the work that I'm doing as a scientist and not tell you that it's intrinsically interesting or intrinsically important and making the nation worth defending, but actually describe the work I'm doing in terms that you care about. Whether you are working on, neutron scattering, and the fact is that, yeah, in some respects, the work that you're doing is informing the therapies that might be going into the person you're talking to's aunt or uncle who's being treated for cancer, or the fact that many of the things that people take for granted around them have a tremendous amount of science underlying them. Or the fact that we need scientists and graduate students from every country in the world to be participating in this. And we can't play political favorites about who we let in and who we dismiss. These are important conversations to have, but as you know, maybe you suggested, Crystal, the one thing about value proposition analysis is the willingness to go outside the academic bubble, to get out of the building and engage in conversations, not telling people what they should know, but asking them what they think. That open-heartedness, I think, is a key to us developing better traction with our fellow citizens, and it simply is something you could do every day in the casual conversations you have with people around you. Maybe that's a good place to stop.
I think that's an excellent place to stop, and a great question. Thank you for that. Okay, so just to wrap up, we're a little over time. This is all the time we have for the official webinar. You can always email webinars@aps.org if there's anything pressing you'd like me to pass on to Peter, or any questions or comments or issues you have. Also, as we mentioned, the recording of the video will be made available. You'll get an email in about 48 hours with that video attached. It will also be housed on the summer webinar page, again, within a couple days. Please take a moment as you leave to fill out the survey so that we can get some feedback from you and continue to improve what we're offering, our value proposition to you. And tune in for the rest of the summer webinar series.
Absolutely. All right, everybody.
Thanks,
Talk
Peter.
to you soon.
Thanks,
And
everyone.
Crystal, thank you so much. Have a great day.
You too. American Physical Society, copyright 2020, all rights reserved. Bye-bye.